Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Total War Warhammer 2 Legendary Lord lore video on Wulfrik the Wanderer. As many of you may know, I have hypothesized in my future DLC for Total War Warhammer 2 video, which if you haven't seen, you can check out in the top right hand corner or in the description below, that Wulfrik will be introduced in Total War Warhammer 2 as part of a Pirates and Raiders DLC. Do check out that video to get the full details on my thoughts on that. But this is a video that covers his lore, and it's taken mainly from my Missing Legendary Lords Chaos video, which if you have seen that, you can feel free to skip this video, but if you haven't, do please sit back and enjoy. Wulfrik the Wanderer. Now, Wulfrik grew up a member of the Saal tribe. He always had a skill for martial ability, and quickly rose through the ranks of the Saal warriors to become a champion of the Saal people. Around the year of the Imperial calendar 2519, so kind of bang on the Total War Warhammer starting timeline, the Saals and the Eilings, their northern cousins over here, started to be in conflict. They had a bit of a dispute, and tensions were rising, and an armed conflict seemed inevitable. The leader of the Eilings, or Eslings, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, at the time was a chap called Torgold. Now, Torgold was a fearsome Chaos Warrior in his own right, and he'd had a dispute with Viglundir, who was the leader of the Saals at the time, and had indeed been a chosen champion of Chaos, particularly of the god Tzeentch. And he was a bit of a slight guy. He wasn't really the typical thing you might picture a chief being, but he was quite bright, and he'd managed to amass a considerable amount of wealth in his time as chief of the Saals. Now, the Eilings had a huge advantage in terms of the quality of their troops and the number of their troops, but the Saals started to go out and try to hire mercenaries to make up the numbers. They hired sort of ogres, they hired other Norscan tribes, they just got a whole bunch of mercenaries together. But because Viglundir really wasn't a fighter of any kind, he obviously had been blessed by Tzeentch, but had never gotten any gifts of strength or anything like that. So he goes to Wulfrik and he says, "Wulfrik, mate, can you please lead our armies into battle?" And Wulfrik's not particularly keen on this idea, and although Viglundir is technically Wulfrik's chief, Wulfrik's kind of an independent party at this point. He kind of does his own thing. There's not a lot you can do to really make him comply to you if he doesn't want to. So Viglundir tries to sweeten the deal. He's like, "Okay, Wulfrik, if you lead my armies and you win this battle, you can marry my daughter, the Princess Hjordis, who was said to be very beautiful at the time, which would give you rights to become chief after I die." So Wulfrik, who was quite an ambitious guy, sort of gave the once-over over Hjordis, and was like, "Oh wow, what a beautiful lady. I would love to tap that ass," as it were. And Hjordis, for her own part, lusted after Wulfrik equally. She was like, "Ooh, what a burly, strapping man. What a beard on him." So they had a crush on each other, let's say. So he was like, "Okay, she's beautiful, and then I can become chief of the Saals. Alright, I'll lead your forces into battle." Despite the fact, Viglundir, I don't really like you. For me, in my eye, I think you're a pale imitation of what a chief should be. Chief should be like me, be hugely warrior-like, muscle-bound, and be able to lead their own armies into war, not weaklings like you. So there's always been this kind of dislike between Wulfrik and Viglundir. So now the armies are set up. They clash at a battle that would become known as the Battle of 1,000 Skulls. There are axes flying everywhere. The ogre mercenaries are wreaking havoc. Wulfrik is carving his way through the enemy hordes, and eventually he comes across Torgold, the chieftain of the Eiling tribe. They engage in battle. They're dodging and weaving and twirling and hacking and slashing at each other, and eventually Wulfrik gets the upper hand and decapitates Torgold. Now, upon seeing their chieftain slain, they're beset by grief and quickly shatter, meaning the Saals have won the day. Now, they celebrate, as any respectable Norscan clan would, with a big piss-up and a feast. So they return back, Wulfrik grabbing the head of his defeated foe, presumably boiling it up or doing whatever you have to do to get a skull within a day, and gets the skull out of the boiling pot and starts to make Torgold's skull his drinking cup for the evening. And as the evening goes on, things are getting a bit more boisterous. Wulfrik started to get in his cups, so got 1 or 2 pints in him, starting to feel a bit merry, and then starts to sort of boast around. "I will drink any man in this hall under the table, just you watch me." And he kicks off a round of drinking games, which results in him single-handedly drinking down down 8 barrels of mead. He managed to actually consume so many barrels of beer, he'd actually impressed the ogre mercenaries, which are quite hard to impress as far as drinking capacity goes. But they were like, oh, good job, look at that little human drinking all those beers. He must be blessed. While he's in the middle of this drinking competition, drinking out of his defeated enemy's skull, they're like, hey boys, I love you lads, we had a great little hack up, didn't we? What a wonderful day. He eventually starts to launch into a series of boasts. And it said by the time the evening was winding down, he'd boasted of slaying every person in the whole of Norsca and every monster. But it was one line in particular that's said to have grabbed the attention of the gods. And that's Wulfrik saying he was equal or the better of any warrior in this entire world or in the next world. And this kind of irked the Chaos Gods. They're like, oh mate, that's a pretty braggadocious thing to say. So we might have to teach you a lesson. But at this point, he does win the competition, but he is extremely, extremely drunk. So Wulfrik potters off to his hut or wherever he's staying and collapses drunk and passes out. Now, during his sleep/unconsciousness, Wulfrik is given a vision. And in this vision, a demon appears to him. And the demon says, I'm going to show you the world, Wulfrik. In all its shining, shimmering splendor, I'm going to open your eyes and take you wonder by wonder. And him and Wulfrik suddenly are magically transported across the world. He's taken to the gleaming cities of the elves, he's taken to the dwarven Carax, he's taken to Kemri, he's taken to Ulthuan. He really gets a flying tour of the world. And Wulfrik gets the impression it's a fantastic point of view and shown him many dazzling places he never knew of. It's almost an indescribable feeling. And they spent the rest of the evening wandering through the endless diamond sky, and eventually the demon starts to explain to him what's going on. And the demon says, look Wulfrik, that statement you made earlier about being the best warrior around, kind of bullshit, but you know what, you've intrigued us. So we're going to give you a challenge. You are going to go around the world challenging the best fighters out there to prove that you're right. And if you don't manage to defeat them and you die, your eternal soul won't ever be able to come up to join Khorne in the halls of what's essentially the chaos equivalent of Valhalla. So the halls of the dead where you can drink and feast all day long with the warriors of old. And instead, you are going to be tortured for eternity by demons in kind of the equivalent of the pits of hell. And I found this quite an interesting concept, the fact that chaos has kind of an equivalent for heaven for their worshippers. But that side, Wulfrik suddenly wakes up and he notices that his mouth feels funny. He's like, what is going on? And eventually he finds someone and he's like, what's wrong with my mouth? And he sticks out his tongue and his tongue's been all twisted and said to have knotted into the shape of that of a bird. Now, what exactly a bird tongue looks like, I'm not 100% sure myself, but you guys I'm sure can Google that one. And not only does his tongue now look like that of a bird, but he seems to be speaking in 1,000 different languages he never knew. And he seems to have this voice in his mind, or this pull in his mind that's kind of speaking to him and telling him to go to these places, and he's really just not sure what's going on. So he runs to the shaman, who's a Kurgan shaman, I think, who's one of the mercenaries, I imagine, who was brought into the Saal territories to fight the battle. And he's like, what is going on to me? Tell me what's wrong. And the shaman goes, oh, we've heard of this. This is the gift of the gods. It's called the gift of tongues. This is why you can speak. And he was like, stop it. Like, make me go back. There's voices in my head. It's driving me nuts. Cut these out. And the shaman's like, I don't know how. And Wulfrik, not being one to suffer fools gladly, decided to start torturing this poor shaman. He said to have burnt off his toes and given him a slow and horrific death, because the shaman couldn't rid Wulfrik of this curse. So without finding any help from the shaman, Wulfrik essentially has to start listening to the voice in his head, because they cause him distress and it's just constant and incessant, and unless he starts working towards that goal, they just won't leave him alone. And the voices in his head are telling him to go and fight a tomb lord down in Kemri. And he's like, okay, how on earth am I going to get to Kemri? It's miles away. It's literally on the other side of the world. How do I get down there? And then he's sort of pondering this, and he chats to a few of his mates about it. It's like, okay, I have to launch probably the longest travel ship, one of the longest journeys the Norscans have ever gone on, I guess, on this long ship. It'll take us years to get down to Kemri. And sort of overhearing this, one of Wulfrik's longtime friends sort of nudges up to you like, Wulfrik, I've heard of something, but I'm not not sure if it's 100% true. And his friend was called Sigvatir. Sigvatir tells him of a story of a ship that apparently is a magical ship that can transport you anywhere you want in an instant. And Wulfric's like, where is this place? He's like, okay, if we want to go on this story that, bear in mind, I can't verify this is a true story, Wulfric, but if you want to pursue this course, we have to go fight a witch in the Scaling territory, which is west of us. And she has a fortress there guarded by demons, and that's where she's keeping this mythical ship. So Wulfric's like, okay, I have no other choice. These voices are going to drive me mad if I don't work towards this goal. So let's go. And essentially it took Wulfric all of the plunder and loot Wulfric earned and all of the rewards he earned from fighting the Aelings, he had to spend to raise an army to go and fight this witch in the tower. Now bear in mind, he hasn't married the princess after the battle because all this stuff has happened to him. He's been slightly distracted, so it's not forefront of his mind. He's trying to get all these voices in his head to stop. This is why he's committed to this course and hasn't stuck around and become chief of the Sarls. So he gathers an army with his mate and they go to the Scaling territories and they launch a raid against this fortress to try and get their ship. Now they're greeted by a number of different kinds of demons and foul creatures from the warp, but true enough to the Norscan manliness and muscle, they managed to defeat them. Wulfric himself managed to fight all the way up to the top of the tower, encountered the witch, battled her with her magics, and managed to cut every limb from her body. Now, whether she made a threat of biting his legs off or not, we don't know, but he didn't leave it there, and instead of decapitating her or giving her a quick death, he decided to drop her in a pot of boiling water and boil her alive. It said that day Wulfric lost 200 of his warriors, but he did manage to get the ship. He left all the plunder to his warriors because at this point Wulfric's not really concerned with money anymore. He's just trying to get this stuff going on in his head sorted out. So they get the longship, and the longship they name Seafang. And indeed, Seafang did everything the stories told it could. It had the ability to transport you as the master of the ship wherever you wanted to go. And having killed the witch, ownership had transferred itself over to Wulfric. Now the ship's magic wasn't free. In fact, the ship, every time you used it, required an offering of blood, and it had a particular appetite for Wulfric's blood. Not enough to kill him, but as kind of ceremonial gesture. And Wulfric made sure that any sort of crewman he ever brought aboard the Seafang gave some blood to the ship itself. Now, the place you'd put the blood is in the dragon mouth, which was at the forefront of the ship. Wulfric finally gets his magic ship and is like, okay, let's see how this goes. So the way the ship works is it transports anyone on board or anyone attached to it or any ships it can drag behind. So you can take a war host with you. You don't all have to fit onto the one ship. You can tie it with ropes and chains to other boats, and all those boats will be transported. And it said they go into a place of sort of demons and chaos magic winds. It's kind of like the warp, I guess, from 40k, except you're not automatically massacred whenever you go into it. So they all get transported to this other realm, and then through that realm they travel, which takes them to wherever they want to go in the real world. So he's like, okay, you guys have been shouting this bloody Tomb Lord Khemri, Tomb Lord Khemri, Tomb Lord Khemri in my head, so let's go. So they go off to Khemri, they get there, he launches a campaign against this bloody Tomb Lord that's been aggravating him and been in his mind for months and months and months, and he slaughters the Tomb Lord and offers his entrails to Nurgle, who apparently had been the Dark God demanding them. But it doesn't stop there. After Khemri, he gets another vision, and this is when Wulfric starts to build up his legend and his mythos. He travels and slays a giant. In fact, it said he scalped a giant, and he's actually made his cloak out of the scalp of a giant that he killed himself, single-handed. He's fought wights, he's fought jarls, he's fought dragons. He's really just gone around killing legendary monsters and heroes all around, always where the voices keep telling him where to go. Now, with this new gift from the Chaos Gods, as Wulfric is going around finding and facing all these champions and monsters, the gift they'd given him of being able to speak in 1,000 tongues, it also allowed him to, and kind of encouraged him and kind of made him forcefully insult any of the challengers he would face on a battlefield, and know their culture to a certain degree, kind of instinctively, that he knew exactly what to say, such as mocking dwarves for their silly beards or being beardless or all sorts of things, from making jokes about your mother. He had this ability to really get at the heart to what would really piss somebody off and yell it out at them across the battlefield. That's really the reason the gods gave him this gift of tongues. It wasn't just to go around communicating with everyone, but it was to go around the world yelling insults that offended people to such a degree that they couldn't help but want to kill Wulfrik. That was the gift stroke curse they gave him. The Seafang has made it impossible to escape from him, thus earning him name Wulfrik the Inescapable. So whenever Gods of Chaos point him towards a target, he goes, and he starts to do this over a series of years. He's just hunting down champion or monster or champion and monster, and it seems that this curse has doomed him to never-ending battle, an eternity of fighting, and that's about it. That's all he can have look forward to for the rest of his life. He will probably die in battle and be cursed to be tortured. And Wulfrik just isn't really happy with the outcome of this. It's like, yeah, of course he enjoys chopping the head off a guy as much as the next man, but he can't do this forever. And he has his own ambitions. He wants to return to the Saal people, to become the chief, to marry that princess he likes. He has his own things that he wants to get on with in his life. And so, not secretly, but whenever he can, whenever he comes across a shaman of particular knowledge or anything, he's still always inquiring about how to get rid of this bloody curse that's been placed on him, or at least he views it as a curse that's been placed on him by the Chaos Gods. Eventually, he runs across a shaman named Zarnath. Now, Zarnath says he actually has a solution to Wulfrik's problem. Zarnath is said to have come from one of the other Norscan areas, or Norscan sort of tribal lands, and he bumped into Wulfrik on his travels. Now, what Zarnath said is that you have to go to the territories of the Chaos Dwarves to retrieve an ancient artifact of, now, I didn't come up with this name, but this is what I think it is. It's an artifact of the Hung Sorcerer Kings. Now, that's not Hun, H-U-N, that's Hung, H-U-N-G, Sorcerer Kings, called the Smile of Sardis. Now, names aside, the Smile of Sardis, he's like, okay, so if I get this, you can do magic and you can get rid of the curse. And Zarnath's like, yeah, of course I can, mate. You just go get that, and I'll go with you, and we'll go get it, and we'll sort this situation out. So Wulfrik gets a little posse together, his best mate joining him as always. Sigvtar comes with him. They raise some troops. They're like, all right, boys, here we go again. Let's go slaughter some Chaos Dwarves. Now, you might think the Chaos Gods might be a little bit miffed at them slaughtering Chaos Dwarves, but not really, because the Chaos Dwarves worship this Hashut character, which is the bull god, which isn't really one of the official Chaos Gods, so they don't mind too much. They're okay with it. So Wulfrik and his guys launch a campaign against the Chaos Dwarves, and they're looking for a fortress of Dronagul, otherwise known as the Fortress of Iron. And it's led by a dwarven lord known as Korak, and he's the one who has this Smile of Sardis artifact. So they charge into this fortress. God knows how, with a bunch of marauders, he's able to take a Chaos Dwarf stronghold, but he is, just through sheer strength of arms and will. During the battle, he ends up fighting a four-legged bull centaur of the Chaos Dwarves and manages to slay it. He goes on to kill the dwarven lord Korak and wins the day. He eventually finds the Smile of Sardis and sort of rips it out of Korak's dead hands. But once everything's settled down and the battle's over, Wulfrik realizes his mate, Sigvtar, is dying, and he goes to him. He's like, oh no, buddy, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this happened to you. And he's like, Wulfrik, as long as it was worth it, buddy, as long as you cure yourself of the curse, I enjoyed a life of hacking and slashing, it's all cool. So he lost his best mate, and he's a little bit upset about this, but Wulfrik's a hardy chap, and kind of buckles up, chin up, and continues on the quest. And he says, okay, Zarnath, what now? And Zarnath's like, okay, to get this magic to work, we need to go to Ulthuan, the home of the High Elves, because that's where the magic is concentrated enough that I can do my jiggery pokery and cure you of your curse. So Wulfrik's like, okay, god damn it, we have to go to another bloody place full of people who hate us. Okay, we're gonna need to stack up on troops. This took a lot out of my army. We have to go back to my hometown, my home area of Norsca, get some more fighters, and then we can go to Ulthuan. So he returns home, and some of the kings of the area aren't particularly happy to see him. Now, if you remember from earlier in the video, we had Viglandir, who was the leader of the Saals. Now, after Wulfrik had killed the Torgold, the leader of the Aelings, Viglandir managed to get his son, Svineborn, to become chief of the Aelings. Now, Viglandir at this point is trying to plot an alliance between the Saal and the Aeling to make them become one very powerful Norse tribe together. And the return of Wulfrik, who seemingly went off on a suicide mission against the Chaos Dwarves, really puts a sort of spanner in the works, because the Aelings are still pissed at him for killing their old chief. Even though Sveinborn, their now current chief and son of Viglandia, wants there to be an alliance, if the people don't agree to it, he can't really make it happen. And the people both hate and sort of venerate Wulfrik. They praise his skill as a warrior, but are still pissed at him for killing their old chief. So his return to the Saals kind of just throws a huge spanner in the works and gets everyone riled up back at home. Now, Sveinborn himself isn't a particularly skilled warrior, so he can't really challenge Wulfrik to try and regain the honor of the tribe he now rules. So what he does is he kind of plots this little scheme to have Wulfrik fight somebody else. And he challenges Wulfrik, and Wulfrik, never being one to turn down a challenge, was like, okay, Sveinborn, you bloody git, let's do this. I'm happy for a fight anytime. And they go to a place called the Wolf Forest. Now, the Wolf Forest is essentially a kind of raised platform in a pit of spikes that is a kind of battling arena that had been built in honor of Wulfrik, so that he could take on any challengers there and, you know, just be the kick-ass duelist that he is. So Wulfrik turns up, he's like, oh, I'm going to fight bloody Sveinborn. He's a bit of a pushover, this won't be much of a hassle. But Sveinborn's actually nominated a champion, and this kind of hulking monstrosity walks onto the platform to fight Wulfrik. And it's huge and clad in black plate, and Wulfrik's like, who the hell is this? He's like the size of a troll. Is this even a person? And eventually, like, it kind of speaks or makes noise, and he eventually starts to put it together. There's parts of this chap he recognizes. And he recognizes it's a guy he used to know or hear about called Framir. Now, Framir was a powerful Chaos Lord at one point, but it seems that he'd become a Forsaken. So the Chaos Gods kind of set him aside or given him too many gifts, and he's become a bit messed up. And he has this kind of claw hand thing going on, and Wulfrik's not really sure what to make of it. He's like, okay, this is going to be a bit of a challenge, this massive bloody Forsaken champion. And they begin to duel, and Wulfrik's spinning and weaving, and eventually manages to slice off Framir's arm. Now, in place of Framir's arm, Wulfrik's like, okay, victory won, arm's gone, gonna bleed to death. Done, let's go get some lunch. But instead of like collapsing or dying or anything, a huge spike erupts out of the socket where Framir's arm used to be, and he keeps coming after Wulfrik. And Wulfrik's like, oh god damn it, what the hell is this guy? And he ducks and weaves and manages to slice Faramir across the stomach, and thinking, okay, disemboweled him, that should do it. But instead of sort of a fountain of blood and the guy collapsing on himself, just these tentacles kind of burst forth from his stomach. So now you've got this clawed, spike-armed, bloody tentacle monster coming at him, and Wulfrik is running out of options. He's like, okay, I seemingly can't kill this bloody thing. So he kind of maneuvers, and realizing that Faramir is now more of a beast than he was a man, than he is the thinking sort of champion he was of old, he kind of leads him towards the edge of the thing and manages to kind of trick him and trip him and push him off the platform. At which point, the monstrosity skewers itself on one of these spikes below. Jumping down to kind of finally deal with him, Wulfrik delves his sword, splitting the helmet of this monstrosity and its skull at the same time, emerging victorious. And so Sveinborn's little ploy has failed, and he hasn't managed to kill Wulfrik. Wulfrik at this point seems very merciful, almost out of characterly merciful, and it's like, okay, I won the champion, that was an interesting fight, I'm off to do something else. I need to go get some guys, we're going to go fight in Ulthuan. And he kind of uses it as a bit of a recruiting thing. Look how great I am, guys, let's go get some loot and plunder, come with me, lads. So he raises his army, and amongst some of these recruits is a chap called Broendil. Now, Broendil is kind of a bit of a sneaky git, and he's taken aside by Sveinborn, the clan leader of the Aelings, just to remind you guys. And the clan leader kind of says, look, Broendilf, let's have a chat here. Once his back's turned, can you kind of just deal with Wulfrik? Just like stab him quickly, like put an axe in his head. Just do something, get him off the playing board so we can make this alliance. And so once my father passes on, I will be the leader of both clans, Saal and Aeling, and we'll combine and we'll become the most significant force in Norsca. And I'll give you some gold for it too. So Broendorf is like, okay, alright, I'll do it. I'll kill him, I'll stab him in the back, and we'll do it. So Broendal joins the forces of Wulfrik and his army, who's going to Ulthuan, and they sort of go over there, and it's like, alright, cool, off we go. Of course, with Seafang, it just takes them a moment. They arrive on the shores of Ulthuan, and they all sort of disembark in his army, and they eventually come across, like, sort of sneaking around, they see this group of women praying in this temple. And Zarnaf is like, oh my god, whoa, watch out, guys, get down, everyone hide. Okay guys, this is a little plethora of legendary witches. Now we have to quickly get set upon them and kill them all before they can get any of their magic off and affect our minds and kill us. So we have to do this quickly and quietly and just massacre all of them. Don't leave a single one alive. So Wulfrik's like, okay, cool, I got the idea. No, let's kill the witches. So they sneak up on them and just slaughter all the women in this temple. Just run them through, just go completely nuts with bloodlust, plunder the temple, get all the gold, and they're like, woohoo! Great job, guys, killed all those witches. And at this point, there's this kind of this cackling in the background. And it's Zarnaf, and Wulfrik's like, okay, Zarnaf, what's up? Zarnaf, what's up with the cackling? And Zarnaf's like, Wulfrik, you fool. I was never trying to cure you of your curse. You've just made me a more powerful wizard. You got me the smiles of Sardin, and now, and to be fair, I wasn't even expecting that. I was just trying to lead you to your death because you were a potential future problem for the civilized world. So I was just trying to get you dead, Wulfrik. Oh, and by the way, those witches that you just slaughtered were just the wives of elven nobles who were coming to this temple of fertility just to pray to have babies, or if they were pregnant, that their babies would be healthy. So you are about to face a wrath unlike any you faced before from the High Elves. So enjoy that. Zarnaf out, and he just kind of disappears. And Wulfrik's like, what the hell was that? Zarnaf lied and betrayed me. I'm going to unleash hell on that guy. But before he knows it, he is set upon by a huge army of elves, of silver helms just come charging down, and it's just a gruesome bloodbath. Wulfrik and his men are fighting back to back. They're completely surrounded, and at the end of the day, as the dust settles on the battlefield, there's only 2 Norscans surviving, and they happen to be Wulfrik and Broendulf. And Broendulf just like, Wulfrik, you saved my life so many times during that battle. Despite the fact that everyone else is dead, I'm only really alive because of you. I have something to tell you. Svineborn and your own chief, Viglandir, have been plotting against you this whole time. They were hoping you would die of the dwarves. Like, they asked me to kill you. It's suspected they worked with Zarnaf to get you killed as well. Essentially, they've been plotting to kill you ever since your initial battle against the Aelings, because you were a sort of a roadblock on their way to joining those 2 tribes together and becoming the powerhouse of the North. You've essentially been a thorn in their side, and they've been trying to kill you this entire time. In fact, Viglandir never intended for you to marry his daughter. Now, I may be a little bit wrong on the lore here, guys, but from what I can gather, he's instead plotted to have Svineborn, his son, marry his daughter, Hjodris, and that's the coupling he wants to have happen, who will rule over this new kingdom he's trying to set up. And they've just been trying to kill you for this entire time over that. Wulfrik is distraught. His ships have kind of been burnt and put to the sword by the High Elves, but what he had managed to salvage was the most important bit. The bit of the ship that had all the magic was the dragon's head of the Seafang, the bit that you feed blood to, and that's really the only bit of the ship that matters. So it's like, okay, we're going to go kill them. And he goes into full vengeance mode. He's like, okay, first things first, that bloody wizard, he's the first one who's on my death list. Let's get Seafang's dragon head to show us where he is. Let's feed it some blood. And they manage to escape from Ulthuan. And they get there and they land somewhere in the Empire. And they're like, oh, this is where he's from. Okay, I see what's happening here. He's a bloody wizard of the colleges of magic. He's from the civilized world. He's not even a Norscan. This is unforgivable. It's going to take an army for us to plow through the walls of this imperial city. Let's go get an army. Let's go home. Feeds the dragon head some more blood. They go back to Norsca. So almost immediately upon arriving home, Wulfrik is looking for Svineborn. He's the first victim of his wrath. And in the sort of when he's going through town, he hears that Svineborn had in fact raped Hjodris, Svineborn's sister and Wulfrik's betrothed. Now Wulfrik this just kind of adds to Wulfrik's rage. And Wulfrik goes and finds Svineborn and doesn't take a sword to him, just starts to pummel him with his fists. And he's beating on Pyle, just raining down thunderous blows one after the other. Svineborn's face is kind of melting underneath the blows as the bones in his face begin to crack and crumble under the power of these unending, unceasing blows from Wulfrik. And after beating Svineborn within an inch of his life, Wulfrik's like, okay, that's enough. I'm just going to kill you now. And he pulls out a dagger and prepares to slit the Lord's throat. At this point, the Lord of the Saals comes in, Viglandir, Sveinborn's father, and he says, Wulfrik, stop. Please don't kill him. We need him. And if you kill him, the Aelings will come and kill all of us, the Saals. They won't forgive you for killing 2 of their chiefs in a row. They won't forgive us and our people. If you kill him, you doom us all. And we don't have the funds we used to have. We wouldn't be able to fight them off like we did before. I mean, obviously you wouldn't necessarily be supporting us. So they'd wipe out our people if you kill him, Wulfrik. And if you don't kill him, we'll help you with whatever campaign or whatever you need. We'll give you everything you need. And Wulfrik was like, okay, I need an army that can raise an empire city, and I need it right now. So Viglandir said, okay, we'll give you an army, but you have to make me a promise. You'll have no more designs on being the king of the Saals, and you have to swear upon this axe of corn, which is a holy relic that the Saals had. So Wulfrik says, okay, I have no more desire to be king. You give me this army, I won't kill your son. That's the deal. Sveinborn finally sort of manages to put himself together, and they sort of collect him up off the ground, and they like, okay, we'll both contribute towards this joint army to go and take this empire city so you can have your vengeance. So Wulfrik's like, okay, I need this army. Let's not kill Sveinborn just yet. So they strike a bargain and they launch their campaign against the empire. And in the midst of this, Hjordis maybe tries to go up to Wulfrik, but he's like, no, girl, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have let yourself get raped. That's your fault. That's on you. I'm not really interested anymore, so you can F off, as it were. Which is a bit cold, but there's Wulfrik for you. He was just like, nah. You should have been a strong enough woman to fight him off or kill him. You shouldn't have let yourself get raped. Wulfrik doesn't really care about this girl anymore, and he knows that he's been betrayed by his own clan boss and this guy, but he also needs them to get vengeance on that bloody wizard who led to the death of his best mate. So he's like, okay, let's fight one of these demons at a time. Let's go for the wizard. Now, with the use of the Seafang and attaching ropes to other ships, they managed to completely circumvent the defenses of Marienburg and Nordland and begin their attack on what was known as the town of Wisborg in the province of Reichland. So he gets a massive army together with all the other Norscans with the help of his enemies, and he's like, okay, let's go. And they launch an attack. As a kind of last-minute gesture, Sveinborn and his father had attempted to bribe a lot of the soldiers in this joint army to get them to turn on Wulfrik in the heat of the battle, and in exchange they would get a portion of the plunder they take from the Empire City. So they've managed to get all the way into the hinterland of the Empire, and they start to siege this town. Now it turns out Zarnaf's real name was Ludwig Stoessel. So the campaign goes through, the Norsemen manage to break through the walls with their immense numbers, they charge through, and Wulfrik, after fighting through the streets, taking down halberdiers, slashing militia, peasants, anyone who really stood in his way, he finally makes his way to Ludwig Stoessel, or Zarnaf as he knew him. Now, Zarnaf, being not a bad wizard, managed to summon a whole bunch of constructs to fight Wulfrik, but Wulfrik, being the badass that he is, just managed to smash them to smithereens. He finally managed to grab Stoessel and begins to carve open his chest, spread apart his ribcage, pull out his lungs one by one, and drape them over Stoessel's shoulder. This maneuver was known as the Blood Raven in the Warhammer world. In the real world, it was known as the Blood Eagle, and it was known as the torture of the Vikings. And that's how he killed him, by sort of tearing open his ribcage, putting his lungs over his shoulders, and having them represent kind of bloody wings. It's said that in the Warhammer world, the Blood Raven maneuver was invented by Valkyr the Bloody, who'd introduced it to the realms of men and to the Norscan tribes. But it's one of the most ritualistic and horrific ways in which you can kill someone, and Wulfrik had been waiting a long time to get even with Zarnaf or Ludwig Stoessel or whatever the hell he called himself. Upon winning the day and getting access to all the loot and the plunder, Viglandir and Sveinborn are expecting the army to turn on Wulfrik and kill him. But Wulfrik, knowing they were bound to betray him and knowing their true nature and knowing that they'd been trying to betray him all along, had told the soldiers, hey, soldiers, you're gonna obey me and you can have access to all of the gold. Unlike if you were doing a deal with your chieftains, who would only give you a partial amount of the gold, keeping the lion's share for themselves. I don't need any gold. You can have all of the gold as far as I'm concerned. And so the warriors never turned against Wulfrik. Now, Svineborn and Viglandia aren't necessarily sure that their men have turned against them, so they collect all the plunder, and they're on the return trip home on the Seafang, or on the special Chaos Winds realm, where the Seafang sails, rather than the physical world. And it's on the ship that Wulfrik kind of turns around and goes, Svineborn, I know what you've been doing, and already sort of suffering the savage beating he'd gotten from Wulfrik before. Svineborn sort of trembling in the corner and just like, oh, what are you talking about? I don't know. I know you tried to betray me yet again. This is it for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to raise your banner above my ship right now to make it look like you've defeated me, and then I'm going to abandon all of your troops in the warp, or in this magical realm, if you will. From then on, your name will be dirt in the eyes of Norscans everywhere. They will feel like you abandoned their men, you'll have no honor, you'll be scum, no one will accept you, you'll be banished, and that almost certainly in the northern lands means death for you eventually. And Svineborn is like, no, please, just of anything you want to do to me, hurt me, murder me, kill me, but leave me my honor and my family honor, please, don't, whatever you want. And Wulfrik takes him up on this offer. In fact, what he does is he grabs Svineborn by the jaw, forces open his mouth, and shoves a snake down his throat. Now, there's a lot of metaphorical imagery one could take from that, but let's take it literally, meaning he literally shoved a poisonous snake down Svineborn's mouth. And this was a whole sort of choking on his own blood and on the snake itself, and he eventually died and collapsed. Wulfrik chopped his head off. Eventually, Wulfrik gets back to Norsca with the fleet, and he walks into the feast hall of Viglandia, throws his son's head at his feet, which had become swollen because of the poison and the venom of the snake that he'd shoved down his son's throat. And seeing this, Viglandia, the chief of the Sarls, is completely distraught. He's like, do you know what you've done, Wulfrik? You've damned us all. Even if you kill me now, all the Sarls will be wiped out by the Aelings. You've killed 2 of their chiefs now. They won't let this lie. They're honor bound to come and try and kill us all. And Wulfrik just acknowledges the fact that he knows this is the case. And he doesn't touch Viglandia. He just leaves him there. And Viglandia's like, no, please, you have to lead our armies. You have to help us defend against this onslaught that we're about to face. And he just keeps walking away. Eventually he shouts out, what about Hjordis? You loved her once, did you not? And Wulfrik pauses and just keeps walking. For little did Viglandia know that before he'd dropped off the head of his son at his feet, he'd gone and killed Hjordis, the princess, already. And Wulfrik just left the mewling, squealing chief in his hall and walked away from the city. Once he was a few miles out, he started to see the pillars of smoke rise from the capital of the Sarl chiefdom, and just kind of chuckled to himself, completely accepting his new fate to go around the world slaughtering anybody. Because as far as his ambitions were concerned, they were done. The princess was dead and had been besoiled before her death. The kingship was something he vowed on an artifact of Khorne that he never could take up. So that dream was dead to him, and he just sort of full-heartedly gave himself to the role of the duelist, the killer of champions that the Chaos Gods had made him. And he walked into the mountains, and to this day he's just carrying out the will of the gods, facing down the champions they sent him to with the use of his trusty ship Seafang, and just murdering his way around the world. And that's the story of Wulfrik the Wanderer. Doomed his own people to a horrible death, never fulfilled his dreams and ambitions, but one of the best warriors in the Warhammer world, and a hell of a murderous, merciless bastard. Wulfrik the Wanderer. In terms of how Wulfrik will play on Total War Warhammer, it has been speculated in a couple of places that Wulfrik might become a Norscan leader of sorts, a Norscan tribal leader, so you can play as a faction of Norsca. I think that would be kind of a waste, not necessarily a waste, but I'd like to see him have access to more stuff than just the Norscan armies. I'd like to see him have some hell cannon and stuff like that. And he is a champion of the Chaos Gods, so don't necessarily make him a Norscan faction, although I get the argument. Make him have huge amounts of buffs to Marauders. Make him make Marauders as good as Chaos Warriors or as good as maybe even chosen, but get him to give massive buffs to Marauders and Marauder Horsemen and all Marauder units on the campaign map. I think that's what you'd have to do with Wulfrik. In terms of his rule on the tabletop, he had a couple of special rules. One was the Gift of Tongues, which essentially allowed him to issue a challenge. Now in the tabletop, once you issued a challenge and the challenge has been accepted, that you guys are locked in combat. So it's a good way of like picking out special characters, killing them separately from the unit-on-unit combat, and it was a particularly effective tool if used correctly. Now, I'm not sure how that mechanic could potentially translate to Total War Warhammer, because the Gift of Tongues essentially meant that because Wulfrik could speak in any language, he could essentially insult you in the most profane ways, and he was kind of had this particular insight into cultural insults and to insults that would really just irk you to such a way that if he challenged, no one could turn it down. Now, there's a couple of ways that could play out in the Total War Warhammer series. One way, which is probably the easiest way for them to do, is maybe just have that be a buff on him in terms of his melee attack, the Gift of Tongues, to make him sort of just give him a boost to attack to make him kill people more effectively. But a much cooler mechanic that I would just love to see, and would be cheesy as hell, would be literally the Gift of Tongues, and within a certain range, Wulfrik selects an enemy character, and that character immediately charges towards Wulfrik. It overrides any commands and can't be commanded until it's dead or Wulfrik's dead, or maybe just lasts for a particular amount of time. That would be fascinating to see. If you could yell at Grimgor from across the battlefield and Grimgor comes up to Wulfrik and tries to take him on in a battle, and the other player just can't control him for a certain amount of time because all he's doing is running towards Wulfrik, that would be a very cool mechanic and a real true interpretation of the lore and an interpretation of the tabletop game as well, but could be horrifically cheesy and could lead to just a new kind of Lord snipering, where you just get the Lord to charge across the battlefield from a certain distance away towards Wulfrik, then just ambush him with all your own characters. But it would be kind of cool to see. So that'd be my preferred implementation of the Gift of Tongues. Another special rule he had was the Hunter of Champions rule, which essentially gave him a 2+ strength bonus and a chance to reroll hits. So essentially the way that will translate to Total War Warhammer is a buff to weapon strength and a buff to melee attack. So that would be a fairly easy enough buff to translate. You could do it for him or for an aura effect as well. Now he also had the Seafang special rule, which is essentially the idea that he can, with a group of marauders, if he's embedded with a unit of marauders, be kind of put anywhere on the battlefield, I think, kind of like a teleportation thing, like so you can essentially encircle enemy units and stuff like that. Now, the way that this kind of battlefield mobility stuff has been translated in Total War Warhammer so far is that usually they just give the unit Vanguard. So it'd be quite interesting to see Wulfrik, who could give all Marauder units Vanguard. I think that would be pretty cool as a bonus. I'd also like to see Seafang have some effects on the campaign map. My idea is, because Wulfrik can essentially transport himself anywhere in the world, is that you actually maybe allow that mechanic to come into Total War Warhammer, not like an underground route system, but a system by which, if he does travel by Seafang to anywhere he wants in the world on the coast, because it is a boat, don't forget, then all of his troops suffer attrition. Now, you could scale it to the further away he goes, the more attrition he takes, and that attrition could be symbolic of the blood sacrifice they have to make to the ship itself when they want to travel with her. So that would be my idea. Give them a turn of attrition and allow them to kind of teleport from coastal line to coastal line around the Total War Warhammer world. I think that'd be a really cool mechanic and really represent the power of the Seafang and why it would be such an important quest item for Wulfrik the Wanderer to get. And that about sums it up for Wulfrik the Wanderer. As always, guys, thank you for watching. Special thanks to my patrons, John, Reese, Colin, Thomas, Matthias, Samuel, Matthews, and Peter. And do please drop a like if you enjoyed it, and do subscribe for more Total War Warhammer content. Thanks again, guys, and I hope to catch you all on the next one.